Okay, so welcome to the First Nations House special workshop on how to make and care for a fabric face mask. My name is Danii. I also go by Danii. And basically, I'm doing this workshop for a couple of reasons. One of the main reasons is that as part of the 7 grandfather teachings, the teaching of wisdom tells me to recognize my gifts and use them. And so I used to be a fashion designer and I'm still quite a good pattern drafter. So one of my gifts is pattern drafting. And I noticed that when making these face masks that people are making, fit is essential. So pattern drafting can be useful in this regard to creating a better fitting mask for people's faces. And this is a very difficult time right now, so we're all still learning new stuff. So if I've missed something, I will try and include it later in an edited version or post it to the YouTube channel in the notes. And if there's anything incorrect about what I'm saying, please feel free to mention that in the YouTube post. I will mention that I am not a doctor and I am not a medical professional of any kind. So this isn't about my medical expertise. This is about fitting. But I have done a good amount of research in the last week and a half about what fabrics to use and what's important for a face mask and using one and caring for one. So I'm going to share the PowerPoint I have prepared. Oh, it seems like it's right in the middle there. Okay, so there's our first workshop. So in conjunction with the idea that I am not a medical professional and not a doctor, I want to also make some other things clear about these masks. It's great that we can use them and that we can limit the amount of spread of the germs. It's important to remember that when wearing a face mask, it's not to protect yourself, but to protect others. And that you are to assume that you have the virus because we can be asymptomatic. So how you wear this, how you care for it, and how it fits all makes a difference. Now, I'm going to acknowledge that these are not N95 masks. These are not surgical masks that we are making. These are fabric. And you'll see over here that this is from Missouri University, and I think University of Virginia as well, talking about different effectiveness for filtering out, you know, I'm not even sure if that's viruses in general or if it's this specific virus, but I'm going to assume viruses in general, only because I'm not sure when they had the time to do that research. Given how fast everything is moved. And so as you can see, the N95, I'm assuming it's called 95 because of the 95% effectiveness. Surgical mask is more effective, or not as effective. And then it sort of goes down in the list. I will point out there's not everything listed here. So I did a little bit of research, and it's a friend of mine actually did the research and then told me about it, saying that silk protects the least amount. But I will say that silk has antimicrobial properties. So while that doesn't affect the virus, if you're wearing the mask for a while, having that antimicrobial fabric next to you might be useful, because other kinds of germs besides viruses, particularly in moist environments around your mouth, could cause bacteria to grow. But mind you, that shouldn't be a problem anyways, because these should all be sterilized after every single use. So what are these masks not good for? They're not good for replacing social distancing. That is still absolutely important. They're also not good and cannot be used for allowing symptomatic people or people with COVID to be around other people physically. So of course, if you have the virus or you have symptoms, you're to avoid people, period, as much as you can. Of course, not medical professionals or potentially caregivers. It's also not good, these masks are not good to use a second time unless they're sterilized. And I'll go into different methods for sterilization based on the different fibers. And then, of course, the same thing, it's not good for sharing with family members unless it's been sterilized properly first. So some of these designs, and the idea that I was thinking is, you know, a household might make a bunch of these and continually use them and disinfect them, and then they get back into circulation again. And if they fit a number of people, then you could use them within your family, all right, as long as they're sterilized. But some of these masks I've made the patterns for are a tighter fit, so they might not fit everybody, so you might have to make ones just for yourself. And then a couple of the other masks are something of a one size fits all as well, to accommodate more people's comfort level and potentially the supplies they have. So I'll have 4 different patterns I'm going to show you, but I do want to point out that a lot of people are making these simple ones. I just did this in paper, that are folded, and then they put an elastic here and here. But this, while it does allow room in here for your mouth, it doesn't fit on the sides as well. So you get more of a gaping on the side. So that's why I wanted to come up with something else. Okay, so this first one is the coffee filter mask. I made the first version in a single layer, but this second one that you see here, I made in 2 layers. And so that's just folded and taped in a certain way with rubber bands. So that one's really easy, anybody can do. And lots of people have coffee filters around their house. And we're not in a particularly short supply of them. And if you look, you'll see that here, you'll see that coffee filters are 40 to 50% effective compared to nothing. So that's actually really great. I'm not sure if that's 1 layer or 2, but I'm going to show you the 2-layer one when we start. The second one is a one size fits all or one size fits most. And it's going to be a simple fit here and then lots of gathering through elastic in here so that it can fit more chins, more faces. Some people have larger jaws and chins, so it can fit more fits. Plus, it's relatively easy to sew, and you can sew it by hand or by machine. But that one is a sewing one, where the last one was not. Now this one's a fitted mask in 1 piece. So the fabric is cut on a fold. I'll get into that in a bit. This one requires a little bit more effort. And if you want it to fit a little bit better, this one is a snugger fit. The trim around the top here is a satin bias tape. You can use any kind of tape or trim, but a bias tape or trim or a stretchy one will fit better. And then it creates a little bit of a seal between your skin and the mask because it's a little bit thicker. Same thing for down here. And so this one's relatively easy to sew as well, but it is, if you're not going to put the trim on, then you can sew it all by hand. But if you're putting that trim on, it's a little bit easier to put the trim on with a sewing machine. And that one, you just need a little bit of elastic and not too much fabric for that one. I have a version I'm going to try of taping that together and see how that works. So you guys will see that demonstration as well. And then finally, a much more fitted mask. So this is a 2-layer mask sewn in 2 pieces. There's a center seam down there, and it's all fitted very well. So there isn't any gathering going on in this mask. And this one, it's going to be a lot easier to sew it on a sewing machine, but you can still do it by hand. When you're turning the item inside out after you're done sewing the main part, it might look a little funny, a little messy if you sew it by hand, but it's not that bad and it'll still work. So these patterns are available at this link, and that so it's my OneDrive, and so there's 3 different patterns in there. The coffee filter one isn't a pattern, it's just folding it and taping a coffee filter in a certain way. When you do take one of these patterns, or all of them, you have to make sure that when you're printing it, it's a PDF, that you print it in actual size. So I've circled it here, it says actual size. You don't want it to fit, and you don't want to shrink oversized pages. You want it to be actual size. Now, different printers print slightly differently. I've included a line here that says it's a 5 centimeter scale on all the patterns so that you can adjust accordingly. And as long as it's roughly 5 centimeters, mine printed off about 1 millimeter smaller than 5 centimeters. So, but basically you want to make sure it's about 5 centimeters. Now keep in mind, if that's my face, I'm small to medium female, and a large male face would need a much bigger mask for these fitted ones. So that's why I provided the one size fit all one, so that it stays nice and snug, covering in all your areas there, keep everything covered. So this one is definitely more for my size, but you can alter that pattern as well just by making it a little bit bigger all the way around. And you can do that for any of the patterns, really. Oh, except the coffee filter. You can't make the coffee filter bigger, but you can put two together if that's the case, if you really need to. Okay, so now I'm going to get into what kind of fabric to use. And there's a lot of information online about masks, how to make them, and all different fabrics. I just wanted to have something that's extremely succinct that people can refer to. So you can use all kinds of scrap fabrics, remnant fabrics, leftovers from projects that you were working on. This small scrap of silk will easily fit at least one of these pieces of patterns. And so you can just fit it into little scraps. I'm using silk because I have a lot left over for some projects, but also for the antimicrobial properties. I do think, though, that this mask right here might be more effective because it has silk on the lining and cotton on the outside. So it would be something equivalent to 2 bandanas, but keep in mind it's a snug fit, so it's less chance of anything escaping. You can also use old sleeping bags, tents, umbrellas, fabric shower curtains. This one right here is something of a shower curtain type synthetic fabric, but you don't want to use plastic because you don't want to suffocate, and that's a pretty easy given. While I think you could make one out of plastic, a clear plastic or some kind of plastic, I don't want to be held responsible for people suffocating because they forgot to put proper breathing holes that are filtered breathing holes. So that's way more complicated than things need to be for this workshop. Okay, other fabrics you can use, obviously just about anything from your linen closet. Pillowcases, terry cloth apparently works really well. Microfiber shop towels are supposed to be really good for filtering out all kinds of particles as well. Coffee filters, as I said, so but paper towels I don't recommend unless they're the thicker shop towels. And other paper products such as actual paper, very uncomfortable, won't fit well. But vacuum cleaner bags, those are supposed to be really good too. And my sister used a gardening, the kind of fabric that you buy for lining before you put your soil in for your plants. I'm not sure how effective that one is, though. I didn't see the stats on that. You can also use any kind of shabby clothing that you wanted to get rid of that weren't good enough to give to somebody else, but you know, is ready to recycle them. It's not great to throw away fabric in general because fabric never really goes through the landfill well, so you can recycle your fabrics if you bring them to Salvation Army, a few locations. But if you have that fabric, you can use that fabric too. Obviously not with holes, and if it's too worn down, but you can cut up anything and use that fabric, keeping in mind that some work better than others, and you can refer to that other list. Some reusable cloth bags, those felted reusable shopping bags, they'll probably be okay, but when I was putting them over my face and breathing, air got in and out way too easy, so I can't believe that they're too effective. I would go for a coffee filter before something like that. And then also scarves, obviously scarves, that's already been mentioned and people are wearing them. These face masks are better fitted and a little easier and less fabric than a scarf. So that's why the face masks might be a little bit easier. But if you are going to cut up a scarf, make sure that the scarf is a tight weave. If it's really loose, there's almost no point in using it. Okay, so if you don't have elastic, I'm told that there's a lot of people who are trying to find elastic and can't find elastic. And elastic obviously is the best because it has that stretch that's going to allow it to fit snugly to the face. So there is the one method, of course, that I use. The first one, I just use rubber bands. If you're going to use rubber bands, you got to be mindful of the latex allergy some people might have. And even if they don't have a latex allergy, they might have a sensitivity that makes their skin uncomfortable around rubber elastics. And so you can get that in office supplies, or you probably have some, or you can get it from the produce. I'll get into the home harvest portion, but if you're going to a store, office supplies would work. Obviously all sewing places, but they're not open. But there's sections in Dollarama and Walmart, which are both open, which will have some elastic. If you go to the crafts section in one of these stores as well, and not just the sewing area, but crafts, and think kids crafts and whatnot, they'll usually have some type of elastic as well. I got this one from Dollarama, this whole big bunch, mostly because I make all kinds of clothing, but this is perfectly good stretchy elastic. It's kind of shiny. It's even pretty looking. You might lose the shine in the wash though. And then of course, camping supplies, hair supplies. Think about either a large hair elastic, or there are some headbands that are just made of elastic. So that can be useful too. And then the best way though is to just harvest around your home. I home harvested for a few days trying to find all the different supplies I need. And you can get it from any piece of old clothing that has an elastic that's still in it, and that the elastic is still usable. Elastic rots over time, particularly if you throw it in the dryer. The heat from a dryer will rot your elastic. So that's why we don't put things like underwear in the dryer if we can help it. So this is the top waistband of a pair of undershorts I think I had, and it was coming apart and everything, but the elastic is still good, so I can use that. This elastic is kind of wide, so it might be too big for my ears, but it looks like it's okay. But you can also cut elastic as well, keeping in mind that it'll fray, so it won't look as nice. Or you can fold it over and stitch it down as well. Other places to get elastic: shower caps, shoe booty coverings that people wear when they come into somebody's home to still wear their shoes. The elastic pull ties on hoods of jackets that are no longer any good. There's usually an elastic in there, especially around raincoats. It's pretty numerous, the possible ways you can get elastic. This is from an attachment from a bra that I no longer have, but I still have the attachments. So you can use that, or if there's some kind of undergarment that is in its last legs. And then the other option as well is you can just cut your own out of stretchy fabric. So you don't have to go out and buy elastic, and you don't have to harvest necessarily from something that's still working. So I have an example here. I just have a piece of stretchy fabric. It's very stretchy. And all I would do is I'd probably cut these strips maybe an inch, inch and a half thick, because as you pull it, it'll get thinner. And if it's just a thin strip, it'll pull even further. So there is some tricks to cutting out from stretchy fabric, but you can I have an old hoodie that I cut the zipper out of, and I cut the ties out of, and now I'm going to cut it up and make it into little stretchy strips as well. So that's covering for elastic. I think I've covered all of them. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so I think I've covered all those. Okay, now the very, very important part to sterilizing. I realize we haven't made them yet, but you kind of should know ahead of time how you're going to sterilize it, as for how which supplies you're going to do. So there's multiple ways you can boil it for 5 minutes. And so this right here is me boiling that silk mask, the one size fits all, with the elastic in it, boiling it for 5 minutes. And I have this spoon here so that I can hold it down to make sure that the whole thing is submersed. You can use a washing machine. Make sure you use hot, obviously. Bleach and water is a possibility, and we definitely use that in the service industry for bar rags and things like that. But it eats away at fabric, and it's not great for the environment. So if that's all you have, then that's fine. Use a bleach and water solution. But bleach really should be a last option if possible. Boiling is really easy, and you don't have to turn on your washer, and you don't need much water. You can literally throw in 5-10 masks and boil them for 5 minutes, and then make sure you dry them. And when you do dry them, you have to make sure that they're not touching anything, that you're not putting your hands on them and whatnot. So you want to make sure that you're keeping in a sterile environment as you sterilize. Otherwise, it's not effective. I found once I was done sterilizing, I put them inside a bag to make sure that they weren't getting contaminated in any way. A lot of people will put their baseball caps in a dishwasher, and I think you could do the same for these face masks, but you got to make sure that you're going to anchor them in some way that they don't get loose and potentially damage your dishwasher. Another method is laying them in direct sunlight. UV is supposed to help with that. And I'm assuming UV lamp lights as well, but I'm not positive on that one. So I'm hoping to get more information about that. But putting it in sunlight, you'd have to do it in direct sunlight for a few days for that to work. And then, of course, the final one is time and isolation. So if you've worn it, and even if you just rinse it or don't even wash it, and you put it out of use for anybody and leave it for a week, at least as far as I know, the evidence indicates that the virus hasn't survived on anything past 3 days, as far as I understand. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. You can also use different kind of chemicals that sterilize most surfaces, but keep in mind that you're going to want to make sure after it's sterilized that you have to rinse it very well. So if it's a Lysol that you're using, you'll have to rinse that very well, because you don't want to be inhaling those fumes. And I really don't recommend it. Alcohol is a little different because alcohol dries really quickly, and it's not going to cause the same kinds of problems that other chemicals will. And I'm going to reiterate the part about different materials sterilized in different ways. So for the coffee filter mask, you're of course not going to wash it. You probably want to just throw it away. And if not, if you are going to sterilize it in any way, I would think alcohol should work and still keep the fabric, the coffee filter integrity. And then laying it in direct sunlight or time isolation. When you boil something, when you boil a fabric, if you use certain synthetics, the boiling will actually melt it like plastic. So the shower curtain, the fabric shower curtain, is a really good one because it's already made to take hot temperature from your showers and be wet regularly. So that one can be effective as far as the synthetics go. And a lot of stretch fabrics, if you're going to use an old t-shirt, they'll have a little bit of synthetic in it, but you don't have to worry about that too much because that won't melt. So you can boil cotton, you can boil silk, you can boil anything that's natural. I don't recommend wool. Wool will shrink intensely, and wool is a very heavy fiber, and if you're going to have it on your face and it's getting warmer, it might not be the best solution. As far as bleach goes, bleach will be fine for that shower curtain synthetics. Bleach will obviously remove color from any natural fibers, usually not from a synthetic fiber, because color in a synthetic fiber is more difficult to fast and then therefore end up leaving the fiber. It won't fade very well. And let's see, what other fibers? I'm going to have to actually go back a little bit to look at the fabric choices just to make sure I'm covering everything. So yeah, that about covers everything. If you're using a synthetic, like a vacuum bag or something like that, that could shrink. I haven't tested that one, so that could shrink. Okay, so that's all the cleaning. And then the final thing is possible ways to attach without having to have it go behind your ear. So you see those hairband there. You could also use a hat. So I've set up my wonderful resilient and relentless hat. I think that's what it says, right? I think so. And I just put safety pins here, but I use large ones so that they can get behind. And there you go. And it doesn't bother my ears at all. And I will be doing it to my baseball cap as well. I marked a spot, but I'm going to put a button on this one. I marked the spot, and I'll get to that a little bit later. Running these workshops is been enough work that I haven't had a chance to get to that one. Okay, so for your coffee filter mask, it's extremely simple. It takes these 3 items. And one thing I will also point out, I don't know how well these rubber bands will take to boiling and or other chemicals. So keep that in mind if you do use rubber bands for stuff and end up needing to reuse the item. So it's really simple. You just fold it in half to find your center mark. I'm using 2. Keep in mind, there's 2 here. And then from that center mark, you're going to go about an inch, maybe a little bit more than an inch from the center mark. Fold that over there. And fold that like that. So it's 2 folds in there. And you're going to do the same thing to the other side. It's about just over an inch. Fold it open like that. And so now you have, that's your main piece all folded, everything you need. At this point, you're going to take a little bit of tape. And I like to go around this whole thing. I'm using green so that you can all see. I like to go around there because it creates a stronger edge. I don't recommend Scotch tape because Scotch tape probably won't stick as well unless it's a real sticky Scotch tape. Put that on the end. Okay, so that's the outside part, that's the inside part. Now you take more tape. And you're basically just going to do enough to fold that over. But you don't want to get tape on the actual rubber band, so you want it beside. No, actually, how am I going to do that? There we go. That's a little bit too much. And I'm going to do one more piece on this side to meet up with the other one. Again, trying to avoid the rubber band because it's just going to end up tearing the tape, the elastic. So that's the one side. I loosened that. Let's put that back in. There we go. Get behind there. That piece there, and just finish it up on this side. You can use duct tape. I would have your pieces already cut for duct tape because you don't want them sticking to each other. And there we go, it's done. And you just put that behind your ears. Now there is one key to fitting it just a little bit better. I'm gonna have to move the camera back here to show you on myself. So I'm gonna open it up a little bit before I put it on. Now this curve it fits nice and snug in there. Everything fits nice and snug except this. So what I like to do is just put a little piece of tape right there so that it fits better. Now, of course, the green tape is gonna stand out like a sore thumb. So you want to you can use Scotch tape for that part. And so now it's all nice, snugly fit in there. You can get your fingers in there, but you have to try. And so that's the whole thing. For this one, I recommend saving the rubber bands if you're throwing it away. And so you just, and that's why that's for if you're disposing of them. So just taking it out, you got your rubber band. And so that's that one. Okay, now we're gonna do that silk mask, the one size fits all where it's gathered at the bottom. So this is the one size fits all mask. This is the pattern 1/2. You'll have to make sure there's a dash line in the file. You'll see it, the whole cutout. Everything is solid here except for this dash line. And that's to indicate that it's to be placed on a fold. So here's my fabric. I already have it cut out. But when I had the fabric laying down, I made sure that I folded it, that I had enough room on the front and back. Placed this dotted line on the fold. And then I cut around. Now for this mask, and again, there's a scale there if you need to make sure that you have it the right size. So all of these masks were made with my face, which is a small to medium female face. So for this mask, it's quite simple. I'm going to show you it all sewn up without the elastic in it. So you sew this, so once you have your piece, you will sew this side and this side. And you can do that very easily with I already got my thread ready. And you don't have to use a needle this big. I'm only using one this big so that everybody can see it. But you can literally just do a running stitch to seal that edge. Now the reason why, and you don't have to absolutely finish this edge, but this edge will make it stronger for when you put the elastic in, because the elastic will create wear and tear in this area. And if you have the fabric folded over, it'll make the mask last longer and the fabric not fray. And so I'm gonna finish this line, and you see how that is. Okay, so that's that very first seam. And you're going to do the same to this side as well. So I just want to show you how not great stitching that is. Very simple. Just think of lacing up something almost. So I left the thread in here. You can tie off a knot and do the other side. But in my case, what I'm going to do is just show you how to do the elastic casing. So this is the elastic casing. When you put the elastic through here and through here, slowly it'll create a nice tight form to your face. That's right, nice tight form to your face. And these sides will touch your cheek, and all of this will be gathered, and all of this will be gathered. This is only a slight gather, and this is a real big gathering. So you need to create a casing for your elastic to go through here and here. When you're stitching this piece down, and any of the stitching you can do on a sewing machine, but like I said, you can also just do it by hand. When you're folding over the top piece, you need to keep in mind that because it's slightly curved this way, it's going to be a little more difficult to pull it over. So the part that's bigger, which is this piece, then the edge, which is this piece, normally over here, or I should show you there, sorry. So this edge is smaller than this line that's over here. It ends up being longer. So when you bend that over, you're going to end up having to gather the bigger side just a little bit. But it doesn't have to look pretty because it's all going to be gathered with the elastic anyway. So I'm starting, because I did this, I'm going to start doing this casing here. And I just want to show you how easy it is by hand. This is also silk left over, I think, from a corset I made a number of years ago. So I didn't even finish that and tie that off or anything. I'm literally just going to anchor this down right there. I'm going to do it twice so that way my thread doesn't end up pulling here, so that thread stays different. It's almost like tying a knot midway. All right. I'm using white thread because I want you to be able to see, but if you want, you can make sure it's color appropriate, or you can pick a fun, shiny, metallic thread. And so all I'm doing is I'm literally just going around. Making sure that it's, that seam allowance is about 5/8, half an inch to 5/8 of an inch, which translates to 1.2 centimeters to maybe 1.5 centimeters. Pull that through. And you do that all the way around the edge. You do that here as well. And after that was already done first. So this is what it looks like when it's sewn. Everything is sewn. Again, you don't have to sew this, but it makes it stronger for the elastics when they pull. This has to be sewn, and this has to be sewn because it's creating a casing for your elastic. So now let's show you how to put the elastic through. And I think I'm just going to use one of my finer elastics to make this a little bit easier. Okay, if you have a crochet hook of some sort, this would make it easier, but you could use also a safety pin, which I do believe I have. I thought oh yeah, I already have some set up. So there's also this this method as well. So just putting a safety pin onto the elastic, and then I'm starting with the top because I foresee that one being a little more difficult because the case is a little bit narrower. The seam allowance is a little bit narrower there. Pulling it through. Sometimes it can be a little difficult to get through there. It might be caught on the fabric, so you have to move it around a bit. Now this is long enough. I don't have to worry about it coming through the other end. But if you were concerned about that, this would be probably your best method. Is you would just take a safety pin and anchor it right there so that it doesn't end up going all the way through, so that you don't have to start over again. So I'm just going to go through the other side. And I just want to finish it so you can see what it looks like as far as tying it up and how it's gathered. It shouldn't take me more than a few more seconds. And see, I have to pull more through because I didn't pull enough. So. All right, that should be enough to get through the bottom. Threading some more. And this is basically how you're going to thread the next mask that we do as well. Just do a little bit at a time. I probably could have used a slightly larger safety pin, which would make it a little bit quicker. But whatever works. If you don't have any of this, you could always put tape around the end, sort of like the end of a shoelace, and it creates something of a hard casing that you can push through as well. Okay, so that's all threaded. And I do believe that it doesn't need to be too long. So I'm gathering this right now to show you what it looks like gathered, but also so that I can figure out how much elastic I need and cut off what I don't need. So I'm doing, holding on to it while I do this so that I don't lose the elastic end. Okay, so that's probably enough on that end, and I'm going to take out some more from the top. And then for now, what I'm going to do is tie this together. Suppose I could have taken the safety pin off first. So I tie that together. For now, I'm not cutting it yet because I want to do a sizing. So I'm going to switch this back over here so you can see it on my face. Okay. So the baggiest part is at the bottom and the shorter edge is at the top. So obviously I have way too much elastic. So I'm now going to shorten it, if you can't hear. Okay, this needs to be a lot shorter, it looks like. Let's try this and see if this is not the best size. It takes a little finagling, but once you know the right size, you can cut all your elastic to that size and be ready to go. But since this is us trying, we have to do it this way first. All right. Oh, and see, my edge was a little loose there, so it sort of came out. Heads up. All right. right, that one is done, and I'll end up cutting the elastic. But I like this one because there's a lot of room in here for breathing, and I can get a little claustrophobic. So even though it's kind of baggy and maybe even silly looking, it's very comfortable to wear, and it can fit multiple chins, right? Like there's all this extra room. So that one's useful for that. Okay, we're going to move on to our third mask. So this is the third mask. There's a bias tape on here, which is just a trim. And the thing I like about the bias tape is it fits, like it's a little bit thicker. You could use pretty much any somewhat stretchy trim. The bias, because it's cut on the bias, it makes it a little stretchier, so it can get around curves nicely. If you use a ribbon, it probably won't have the same give because unless it's stretchy, of course. And basically what this is so this is the pattern piece. Be mindful that this is also one that you cut on the fold. You're only cutting one of these, so there's the fold there. I placed on the fold. This is a shop towel, a disposable shop towel. And that's what it looks like open before it's sewn. And so this design can be with a bias here, but it doesn't have to. I also did one up, so this is inside out, so I just stitched. What you're going to do is you're going to end up stitching here and here first. And then for this one, because I didn't put the bias tape on, I just folded it over just a little bit because I didn't want to lose too much of the size, and just stitch that down. So it creates a stronger edge that doesn't lose its shape, that won't fray. Plus it keeps this spot nice and comfortable for when you need to put the elastic through. If it's frayed here, this edge might end up falling apart more. By folding it over, it creates a stronger edge. So for this one, that's all I did there. And then, so I sewed this first, sorry. So I sewed these lines first. Then the second thing I did was fold this over and sew along here and here. And then the third step was folding it over here and stitching, and of course on the other side. And then just like how we put the elastic in the last one, we're going to do that for this one. Now, the thing about this design, the fitting in here, this is where you get the snug part of your fit. So as you use this elastic, this will gather together, make a smaller space or smaller width of the mask, and it'll fit more snugly to your face. And all you need to do is just like I did before, or you can also use a, like I said, a crochet hook of some sort, or a knitting hook of some sort. And you can, well, I should be doing it on this one. So put it through there. And then let's grab this one and close the hook. And then pull that through. It's really quite easy. These ones, you're only going to make them about like literally the size, or approximately the size of the length there, and then tie it up. And that should be more than enough. But if you think your face is significantly larger than mine, you might need a longer elastic there, or you might need to just make the whole pattern just a little bit bigger. Maybe put an 1/8 of an inch or 3 millimeters all the way around. So that's one without the trim on it. This one is me starting the trim, and I just want to show you what that looks like. So when I put the trim on, bias tape is folded in half, and then those halves are folded in half. So I have the folded half here going around, but then I unfolded the other part to make sure that I had enough fabric on the edge. And that'll create a nice seal, or something of a seal around the face. Not complete seal, obviously, because you need to breathe. Then I would end up finishing this side, the bottom part, and then I do the same thing that I did for that other one. I'd fold it over, stitch that down, and put the elastic through. And so that is this mask. And this one has been washed, sterilized in a number of different ways, boiling, with alcohol. I didn't use the Lysol, and hand sanitizer alcohol. So 70% alcohol I have, and a sanitizer as well. And it all held up great. I cut it out of the mechanic cloth, or the mechanic shop towels, or whatever you want to call them, because I wanted to see if we couldn't just do this in a tape version as well. So this is basically, I'm putting it where the seam allowance would have been. The other side, or the other end, I should say, the chin part. Folding that over. And then because this stuff actually, it tears pretty easily. That's why I don't think towels are the, this kind of towel is the best. But I think what I'll do then to make it a little bit stronger is just put that there. And just to finish up those edges there, because that's where it's going to take most of the pressure. I suppose I should have made this one a little bit longer, the tape part. Yeah, I think that'll hold. Okay. So I'm going to take the elastic that from our other ones. Well, actually, that's going to be too long. So it looks like I'm going to have to thread one through like I've done with the other method. So let's just seal this up first. Oh, oops, I did it backwards. Oh well. You'll have the tape showing. What I meant to do was have the tape on the inside, but I've done it backwards. But you get the point, and you should be able to fix that for your own. So I folded that over, just like I did for the coffee filter one. Created a case there. Now I'm going to take a okay, take this thread, or take this elastic here. Use a safety pin to bring it through. This is going to be a little bit harder to bring through because the tape makes it firmer, but it should go. It should go all right. Okay, and oh, I did do that on the right side. Okay. Okay, so now I'm going to turn that, so the elastic's in there, and you do the same on the other side. I'm going to turn this inside right to see what we got here. Now, keeping in mind that it ends up keeping, so it ends up so that you still have all that seam allowance showing. So what I will have to do for this tape version is I have to make sure that I'm folding it in such a way that when I tape it, I give enough room for fabric. So I made sure that I have seam allowance there. Again, you don't have to use this intense colored tape. I'm using it so that people can see what I'm doing better. Fold that inside. There you go. Do the same to the other side. I didn't need one that large. Covering up that dart. I'm going to stick that piece in there. Fold that over. And that is basically your mask, but in tape version and out of the shop cloth. Again, this will tear easily, so I can't imagine you'll get too many uses out of it. It tears easier than the coffee filters. Notice I didn't put any edging around here. I mean, you could put tape around there, but some people find tape annoying touching their face, so that they might not like that. So yeah, that's a tape version of that one. You'd obviously put the string through again on the other side, and then you'll make sure that you tie it off, and then this will gather, but masking tape will work a little bit better because it's a little more soft and movable. And so what I do with paper or other things that I need to soften, I just scrunch them up to soften them. And now it's created a much nicer gathering surface. And that actually holds pretty good. That holds better than I thought it would. So that's that one. Okay, we have one more mask left. Oh, there's this one. So this is the two-piece, and it's fitted in very well to the face. So this doesn't gather. This instead was perfectly fitted to my face. I made a small amount of opening there so that the elastic will automatically stay close together and won't create a gap as this will. If you have an elastic here and here, you'll have this huge gap there. So I made this small so it'll fit nice and snug. It goes over the nose, and this is one that requires more sewing, and I recommend people use the sewing machine for this, but you can still sew it by hand. It just might not turn out as tidy. So I've done these at different stages. The very first stage obviously is cutting out the pattern. So where the other ones you placed the pattern on the fold, this one's a little different. You don't have to use this as your grain line, but if you want it to fit a little better, and if it's a 1x1 woven fabric as opposed to a knit, you might want to make sure you use that as your grain line. And grain line is just basically, I don't know how well you can see it here, but I chose the Dupioni silk because usually, maybe you can't see, but usually you can see the lines very easily of the fibers. And so this is woven this way and that way. So it's just a 1x1 weave. And you want to line it up so that the grain line is on at least one of those 1x1 weaves. But if it's knit, you really don't have to worry. And it's not the end of the world if it doesn't, if it's not perfectly on grain. But when I do put it on grain, this is how I do it. Actually, maybe it'll be better. So I noticed that this grain line is almost the same as that, although there's a little bit of a tilt down there. So you're almost going to line it up perfectly there, but an easy way to do it is I just put my fingernails on there, hold that, and then I check, or I fold it or whatever, and I check to see if that's on straight of grain. And you can't see this, but it is, and there's a pretty big grain line right there. And so now it's on straight of grain. And then what I end up doing, oh, and I got to make sure that it's all in there. So I'm going to have to move that just a little bit to make sure the whole thing gets on there. But there's a piece of perfectly good silk that I could cut out one of the pieces of the mask to. When you are cutting out a pattern, you can do that a number of ways. You can just put Scotch tape underneath to hold it in place. Or sorry, masking tape. You can use Scotch tape too. Masking tape, it's nice because it comes unstuck easier. So that's good for a lot of things. And then you hold it in place and you cut around, and that's that. You got to make sure though you cut 2 of these in whatever fabric you're using, and then 2 for the other layer. So you'll be cutting 4 of these ones. So once I've got them cut out, I put the right sides together. In this case, you can't really tell the difference, but in certain fabrics, you can. That's the wrong side of this mousse fabric, and that's the correct side. Or this is the right side, this is the wrong side. So you put the right sides together whenever you're sewing 2 things together. Stitch it down here. Again, sewing machine works a little bit better. You get a nice curve to this. So when it's done, it'll look a lot better. Then you trim off that excess extra seam edge fabric, seam allowance fabric, because when you turn it inside out and you're putting the 2 layers together, you need to get rid of that extra bulk. Now, for this pattern, for my face, I already have a seam allowance that's about 1 centimeter or 1.2 centimeters thick here and here. So you can sew it at that and trim it down, or if you want a larger mask, you can just sew closer to the edge so that you're only about 3 or 4 millimeters in from the edge, and it'll make your mask a good amount bigger. So that's one way of grading it. But yeah, you're going to make sure you cut all that off. You have 2 of these, you cut them off, that part, and then you put the 2 right sides together. So in this mask, I have silk on the one side, cotton on the other, and this is the outside and the outside, or sorry, the inside part and the inside part. So I put the right sides together and I sewed it. I sewed it here and I sewed it there. So that's your second stage of sewing. This is your first, and then the next is putting the 2 together and you sew them. And then, oh, and sorry, I forgot. And then trim down that extra fabric as well, because you don't want too much bulk. So let's say I finished that. I'm just going to turn it inside right to show you. And so for this, you can use an iron, or you can use just your fingers to roll it out and make sure you got all the way to the edge. You can do that all the way around the air, just making sure it's like a finger pressing. And if you're like me and you have something of sweaty hands, it ends up being extremely effective because the moisture helps set it. Okay, so that's the bottom part, and do that for the top as well. Okay, so you have your shell complete. The only thing that's left to do is tucking this in here. And I usually will just place a pin there just to hold the seam allowance and hold the whole thing together. But the actual seam allowance that you're using, it's about 1 centimeter or less. But if you need more room, you can make your pattern a little bit larger as well. So I have that edge ready to go, and I'll do the same on that edge. Then once I have it all together, I'll take a piece of elastic, of whatever kind of elastic you can get, and I will put a piece in here. So I stuck it inside, and inside I have about 1 centimeter long. So you want to make sure you have enough so that it won't pull out. And then you're going to do the same to the other side and cut it and stick it in there. Now for this, it really only needed to be a few inches long, but check out your own ear length. You might even want to put safety pin here and here and try it on and make sure you have the right length first before you cut, or you can stitch this one on first this one after. But to stitch this in, once it's cut, you're going to stick that other piece inside. And then all you're going to do is, preferably on a sewing machine, stitch straight down there. And when I do this part, I go over it 3 or 4 times, back and forth, 3 or 4 times here, and at that end as well. So I don't know if you can see it too well, but it's thicker amount of thread here because I went several times and several times. And that's because this is a lot of wear and tear right there, or a lot of tension. So you want to make sure it's a good, strong stitching in there. And so that's that whole thing. And technically you could wear this in reverse if you want. I like the silk on the inside. And then this is just a simple 1x1 cotton. And then that's that mask. So, I'm gonna put this back here. So that is all the masks in a nutshell. You can go to the OneDrive folder and download all 3 of the patterns that I drafted and fitted. Or you can also just do the coffee filter on your own. I didn't make a pattern for that because it's just a few folds and some tape. So I hope everyone out there stays safe. Don't forget to properly dispose of your masks if you're disposing them, and wash them, sterilize them, make sure they're clean before a second use or anybody else using them of any kind. And so stay safe, everyone, and take care, and thanks for joining me.